The Prevention of Terrorism Acts were a series of acts of the Parliament of the United Kingdom from 1974 to 1989 that conferred emergency powers upon police forces where they suspected terrorism. The direct ancestor of the bill was the Prevention of Violence Act 1939, which was brought into law in response to an Irish Republican Army campaign of violence under the S-Plan. The Prevention of Violence Act was allowed to expire in 1953 and was repealed in 1973 to be reintroduced under the Prevention of Terrorism Act 1973. In 2000, the acts were replaced with the more permanent Terrorism Act 2000, which contained many of the powers, and then the Prevention of Terrorism Act 2005. See also Terrorism Act 2006. Powers contained in the Acts. The Prevention of Terrorism Act 1989 had 7 parts. Prescribed organizations. Allowed for organizations to be made illegal, making membership an arrestable offense. It was also an offense to soliciting financial support for any listed group, display signs of public support, or attend a meeting supporting a listed group or addressed by a group member. The maximum penalty was 10 years imprisonment and an unlimited fine. The initial groups outlawed were the Provisional Irish Republican Army and the Irish National Liberation Army and numerous loyalist groups. Exclusion orders could be issued as expedient to prevent movement within the United Kingdom. Orders were issued against individuals to either prevent them entering or being in Great Britain, to exclude them from Northern Ireland, or to exclude them from the United Kingdom. It was an offence to breach an order or to aid another in effecting entry. The maximum sentence was 5 years imprisonment and an unlimited fine. Financial assistance for terrorism, as well as the provision under the first part of the Act, contributing, receiving or soliciting financial support for prescribed groups was an offence under this part also. Additionally, it was an offence to contribute any other resources to assist in the retention or control of funds for prescribed groups or terrorist acts, or to fail to disclose to the police any suspicions notwithstanding any other restriction. The maximum penalty was 14 years imprisonment and an unlimited fine. Arrest, detention and control of entry. This part allowed for the arrest of individuals without a warrant and on reasonable suspicion that they were guilty of an offence under the Act or otherwise concerned in the commission, preparation or instigation of acts of terrorism. The period of initial detention was up to 48 hours. This could be extended by a maximum of 5 additional days by the Home Secretary. The detainee was exempted from certain provisions of other acts relating to the arrest procedure and illegal protection of those arrested. This part also allowed for streamlined search procedures of persons or property and checks under the Act on persons at port or other border controls. The remaining parts of the Act are largely technical, although the Northern Ireland provisions extend the right to search property, restricts remission for those convicted of statutory offences, and tightens control over the granting of licenses under the Explosives Act 1875. Censorship. In 1980, the BBC's Panorama filmed the IRA on patrol in Carrickmore. The footage was seized by police under the Prevention of Terrorism Acts following an outcry in Parliament and the press, as well as Thames TV's Death on the Rock in 1988. They were also used to convict Channel 4 and an independent production company over a Dispatches report in 1991 under new powers in the 1989 revision. History of the Acts. The first act was enacted in 1974 following the IRA bombing campaigns of the early 1970s. The act was introduced by Roy Jenkins, then Home Secretary, as a severe and emergency reaction to the Birmingham pub bombs. The apparent chronology was that there were pub bombings by the IRA in Birmingham on the 21st of November 1974. 21 people died and 184 were injured. There was a strong desire to respond to what was perceived as the greatest threat since the end of the Second World War. The conception of the bill was announced on the 25th of November, when the Home Secretary warned that the powers are draconian. In combination they are unprecedented in peacetime. Parliament was supportive and had passed the bill by the 29th of November, virtually without amendment or dissent. The bill passed through the Commons on 28 and the 29th of November and passed through Lords on the 29th of November. In fact, much of the bill had been drafted in secrecy during the previous year, as shown in the only full-length television commentary on the legislation by Clive Walker. The Phillips Commission on Criminal Procedure, published 1981, had a significant impact on the subsequent 1984 legislation. It was rewritten in 1976, 1984 and again in 1989, but continued to stay as emergency, temporary powers that had to be renewed each year. The first three acts all contained final date clauses beyond the annual renewal. This provision was not included in the 1989 Act.